Porters push wheelchairs. They do not question my runway. Dana Lyle's heel struck the brass gate stamp before Raymond Cole could reach it. The stamp spun across the polished concourse, flashing beneath television lights, then disappeared under the edge of the ceremony stage. A few travelers stopped. A camera operator lowered his lens. One of the governor's aides froze with a folder pressed against her chest. Raymond remained beside the empty wheelchair he had been assigned to move. At 59, he had learned how to absorb pain without advertising it. His left leg carried the stiffness of an old runway injury, and bending quickly was no longer simple. Still, he lowered himself carefully, one hand gripping the chair's handle while he searched beneath the stage. Dana adjusted the microphone clipped to her navy jacket. "Someone remove him," she said. "We have donors arriving." Behind her, a gold banner announced Tidewater Regional Airport's new state funding package. Rows of officials faced the stage. Local reporters stood shoulder to shoulder near the windows where the fading Norfolk sky had begun turning the color of steel. Beyond the glass, 3 passenger jets circled instead of landing. Their navigation lights moved silently through the gathering dusk. Raymond's fingers closed around the stamp. Its round brass face was scratched from years of gate transfers, weather delays, missed connections, and frightened passengers who needed someone patient enough to explain what came next. He brushed a strip of dust from its handle and rose slowly. Dana's smile tightened when she noticed he had not left. "That was not my instruction," Judge Cole said. Raymond placed the stamp in the pocket of his porter vest. Then he rested one hand on the black tablet mounted beneath the wheelchair seat. The screen was dark, but a thin red indicator glowed along its edge. Dana noticed it. For half a second, something shifted behind her practiced expression. "What is that device?" Raymond did not answer. A ground supervisor near the stage entrance suddenly pressed 2 fingers against his headset. His eyes moved toward the airfield, then toward Dana. "Director Lyle," he said quietly, "operations is asking whether runway 29er is still cleared." Dana covered the microphone with her palm. "Tell them the maintenance confirmation stands. They say the approach lights. The confirmation stands." Her voice was low enough for the front row to miss, but not low enough for Raymond. Outside, another aircraft banked over the dark water. Its landing lights swept across the terminal windows, briefly illuminating every face in the concourse. Raymond pulled the tablet free. Dana came down from the stage. "You are assigned to passenger services," she said. "Whatever complaint you think you have can wait until after the ceremony." "It cannot wait until after the first evening arrivals," Raymond replied. His voice was calm. That made her angrier than shouting would have. She extended her hand. "Give me the tablet." Raymond's thumb moved across the screen. A document opened beneath the federal seal. Most of its text remained hidden from the people nearby, but the title at the top was large enough for Dana to read. "Runway Closure Order." The color drained from her smile. She reached for the tablet, but Raymond rolled the wheelchair between them. The metal footrest struck the stage with a sharp clang that carried across the concourse. Every nearby conversation stopped. Dana glanced toward the reporters and recovered instantly. "This man is confused," she announced. "He has been interfering with airport operations all afternoon." Raymond studied her for a moment. Then he said, "No, ma'am, I have been documenting them." A phone began ringing at the operations desk. Then another. The ground supervisor touched his headset again. This time his hand trembled. "2 incoming flights are requesting diversion instructions." Dana spun toward him. "Who authorized that?" Before he could respond, the stage screens flickered. The airport logo vanished. A red status bar appeared across both displays. "Federal operational notice received." A murmur rolled through the seated officials. The governor's aide opened her folder. A reporter lifted his microphone. Outside, the circling jets continued tracing bright arcs above the Chesapeake darkness. Dana seized the podium. "There has been a misunderstanding," she said. "The runway is safe." Raymond rolled forward with the closure order glowing on his tablet. Beneath the stage where Dana had kicked his brass stamp, a cable hummed and the ceremony lights brightened. The funding banner behind her looked suddenly less like a promise and more like evidence. Dana reached for the microphone before anyone else could speak, but Raymond had already signed his name. And within the next 60 seconds, the airport director who had built her career on the appearance of safety was about to lose control of every runway beneath her authority. To understand why a wheelchair porter held that power and why an old brass stamp mattered enough for Dana Lyle to kick it in front of 100 witnesses, we have to go back 6 hours before the cameras arrived, before the evening fog rolled in, and before anyone at Tidewater Regional knew Raymond Cole was watching. 6 hours earlier, Tidewater Regional Airport smelled of burnt coffee floor wax and salt carried in from the Norfolk wind. Raymond Cole reported to passenger services at 11:45, 10 minutes before his shift officially began. He wore the same navy porter vest he had worn for 3 years, pressed clean at the shoulders and faded near the pockets. Pinned above his name badge was the brass gate stamp. It was an old-fashioned tool in an airport filled with scanners and glowing screens. When a wheelchair passenger changed gates, Raymond used it to mark the transfer card so the next employee would know the chair had been checked, the passenger accounted for, and the route confirmed. Most travelers never noticed it. Raymond always did. His first passenger that morning was an elderly woman traveling alone to Raleigh. She gripped the armrests each time the chair crossed a seam in the floor. "Are we late?" she asked. "We have 12 minutes more than we need," Raymond told her. It was not quite true. Her gate had changed twice, and the elevator nearest Concourse C was closed for the funding ceremony. But panic rarely helped anyone move faster. Raymond took the longer route, avoiding a service ramp that jolted his left hip whenever he pushed too much weight downhill. The pain had lived there for 9 years. On wet mornings, it spread from his thigh into his lower back. On cold nights, it woke him before sunrise with the memory of metal rain and runway pavement. He never discussed the accident with passengers. When the woman reached her gate, Raymond stamped her transfer card and handed it to the agent. "There," he said. "You're exactly where you need to be." She smiled and touched his sleeve. "You make this place feel less frightening." Raymond nodded once, then moved on before the words could settle too deeply. He spent the next hour helping a veteran with a prosthetic leg, a father traveling with twins, and a woman whose portable oxygen machine had been sent to the wrong checkpoint. He knew which elevators stalled, which restroom doors were too heavy, and which gate agents would quietly hold a boarding door for 30 seconds without being asked twice. He also knew which shortcuts should never be taken. At 1:15, while returning an empty chair near Gate 11, Raymond paused beside the eastern windows. Runway 29er stretched toward the gray edge of the Chesapeake Bay. In daylight, its centerline looked precise and ordinary. Beyond it, maintenance trucks moved near the approach lighting system. One truck was parked. The second had no crew around it. Raymond removed a small notepad from his vest and wrote down the time. A baggage supervisor passing behind him gave a tired laugh. "You checking the weather now, Ray?" "Lights," Raymond said. The supervisor glanced outside. "It's daytime. It won't be at 6. The man shrugged and continued toward the service corridor. Raymond slipped the notepad away. Inside his locker, beneath an extra pair of gloves and a bottle of pain medication, sat a black Federal tablet. It carried no visible agency markings when powered down. Beside it was a thin folder containing pilot reports from the previous 3 weeks. 2 crews had described missing approach lights during low cloud. One captain had reported a misleading visual pattern while descending over the water. A third had chosen to go around. Each complaint had been closed locally as a temporary maintenance issue. Raymond had been sent to determine whether temporary had become routine. Officially, he was working undercover because passenger service employees moved through parts of the airport executives rarely noticed. They heard radio calls, saw maintenance shortcuts, and watched which problems disappeared from the record before inspection days. Personally, Raymond had accepted the assignment for another reason. 9 years earlier, before he carried wheelchairs, he had worked airfield operations at a smaller airport outside Richmond. During a storm, a runway edge light failure had been reported delayed and marked as corrected before anyone physically confirmed the repair. Raymond drove onto the pavement to inspect it. A service vehicle entered from the opposite taxiway. The collision shattered his pelvis and ended the career he thought he would have until retirement. The other driver survived. Raymond did too. But ever since, every phrase, such as "probably fixed" or "should be working," carried the sound of tires sliding across rain. At 2 o'clock, an announcement reminded employees that the governor's funding ceremony would begin at 5:30. The central concourse was to remain spotless. Delays were not to be discussed near invited guests. Staff without ceremony assignments were instructed to stay clear of the stage. Dana Lyle's voice followed the announcement live. "Today is about confidence," the airport director said. "Our guests need to see Tidewater operating at its very best." Raymond stood near the gate desk holding a wheelchair transfer card. Confidence, not safety. He stamped the card and checked the time. The first evening arrival bank would begin shortly after 6. Fog was forecast over the bay before sunset. If the pilot's reports were accurate, the approach light failure would be most dangerous precisely when Dana's ceremony ended and the scheduled traffic increased. Raymond entered a service elevator and pressed the button for the ground level. The elevator descended with a hard shudder. When the doors opened, the smell changed from coffee and perfume to rubber fuel and damp concrete. He followed a painted yellow line toward the operations office, pushing an empty wheelchair so no one would question why a porter was below the concourse. A maintenance clerk sat behind the half-open door. Raymond placed the chair against the wall. "I need the transfer route for the remote gates," he said. The clerk handed him a laminated map without raising his head. Beside the keyboard lay a printed taxiway light outage log. Raymond caught only 3 details before the clerk covered it with his forearm. Repeated failure. 29er approach sector. Director authorization. "Anything else?" the clerk asked. Raymond's gaze returned to the map. "No." He pushed the chair back toward the elevator. In its steel reflection, his expression remained calm, but his hand had tightened around the chair grip until the knuckles whitened. The outage was real. Someone had documented it, and Dana Lyle's authorization was attached to the page. As Raymond reached the concourse again, workers were hanging the gold funding banner above the stage. Dana stood below it, directing photographers, while a supervisor ordered 2 gate agents to remove a delay notice from the public display. Raymond touched the brass stamp pinned to his vest. Then he checked the black tablet hidden beneath the wheelchair seat. He still needed the full log. He still needed proof that the lights had not been repaired. And he had less than 4 hours before the first evening aircraft descended toward a runway someone wanted to make look safe. By 3 o'clock, Dana Lyle had transformed the main concourse into a stage set. A velvet rope blocked the center walkway. Fresh flowers hit a cracked floor panel near security. Employees polished glass that had already been cleaned twice, while a rehearsal video showed Dana welcoming the governor beneath the words, "Safety, Access, Growth." Dana stood in front of the screen practicing where to pause for applause. She had built her reputation on appearances that could be photographed. She spoke at transportation conferences about passenger trust, posted videos thanking frontline workers, and remembered the names of major donors before they entered the building. Service employees knew another version of her, that Dana measured people by whether they improved the airport's image or endangered it. A wheelchair porter was useful when a camera captured him helping an elderly traveler. A porter asking why a runway delay had vanished from the public board was a problem. Raymond watched from Gate 9 as Dana stopped beside a young gate agent. "Why does Flight 418 still show a delay?" she asked. Crew reported a lighting concern on approach. Dana's smile remained in place, but her voice hardened. "Operations has not issued a closure." "No, ma'am." "Then the screen should say weather sequencing." The agent hesitated. The captain specifically said, "Passengers do not need cockpit speculation." Dana reached across the desk and changed the display herself. Lighting inspection became weather sequencing. A small edit, 3 words replaced by 2. But Raymond had seen institutions become dangerous through smaller changes than that. The gate agent noticed him nearby and lowered her eyes. Dana followed her attention. "Mr. Cole," she said, reading his badge, although she had passed him hundreds of times. "Do you have an assignment?" "I'm waiting for a passenger arriving from Baltimore." "Then wait closer to the jet bridge. We do not want empty chairs scattered near the ceremony." Raymond placed both hands on the wheelchair handles. "This flight's captain reported the approach lights." Dana's expression emptied. "That is not your concern. It may affect the next arrivals. You are not in operations." "I used to be." Dana gave a brief, humorless laugh. "Used to be is not a job title." The gate agent flinched. Raymond did not. Dana leaned closer, keeping her voice low for the benefit of the cameras behind her. "This airport has a chain of command. Employees who ignore it create confusion, and confusion creates fear. Today, fear is the one thing we cannot afford." She moved away before Raymond could reply. The rule sounded reasonable: stay within your assigned role. In Dana's hands, it became a way to ensure that only approved people could describe what they saw. At 3:15, supervisors gathered staff beside the baggage escalators. Dana's operations manager repeated her instructions. No handwritten delay signs. No maintenance carts near the ceremony windows. No discussion of equipment outages with passengers, reporters, or invited officials. Any employee approached by media was to direct questions to administration. Raymond stood at the rear with the other porters. One supervisor added, "And nobody goes below concourse level without written authorization until the governor leaves." The order closed the easiest path to the outage log. Raymond studied the supervisor's face. The man did not sound proud of the instruction. He sounded frightened of being seen disobeying it. When the meeting ended, an older porter named Leon fell into step beside Raymond. "You asked too many questions today," Leon murmured. "Do I?" "Dana sent 2 people home last month for talking about a baggage system failure near reporters." "Were they wrong?" "No." Leon glanced around before continuing. "That did not protect them." Raymond understood the warning. Undercover work depended on patience. He had been instructed to observe record and avoid unnecessary exposure until the evidence met the federal threshold for intervention. But the evening fog was thickening faster than forecast. Through the windows, the far end of runway 29 had begun dissolving into gray. Maintenance vehicles had left the approach sector, yet no test pattern flashed along the lighting line. At 3:40, Raymond collected a passenger from an arriving regional jet. The man wore a business suit and complained loudly that his connection had been moved to another concourse. Raymond listened, checked the transfer card, and chose the indoor route. Near the operations corridor, a warning light above a restricted door blinked amber. A maintenance clerk stepped out carrying a stack of paper for the shred bin. On top was the taxiway light outage log. Raymond saw the date column first. 5 failures in 11 days. Then a row marked repaired. Beside it, in smaller print, no nighttime verification. The clerk shifted the stack against his chest. Raymond guided the wheelchair closer. "Excuse me," the passenger said. "My gate is the other direction." "Elevator closure," Raymond replied. The clerk stopped at the shred bin. A radio call crackled from inside the office. "Approach sector still dark on tests." The clerk paused. Raymond heard a second voice answer through static. "Do not enter that in the public system. Director's instruction." The passenger twisted in his chair. "What does that mean?" "Probably routine," Raymond said. But the clerk had noticed him. Their eyes met. For one dangerous moment, Raymond thought the man might hand him the log. Instead, the clerk pushed the papers deeper against his chest and returned to the office. The restricted door shut between them. Raymond continued toward the elevator. He had nearly seen enough, but nearly would not close a runway. Federal action required a record he could attach, authenticate, and defend. At gate 14, he delivered the passenger and stamped the transfer card. The man stared at the brass tool. Airports still use those. Some parts of them do. Raymond returned the stamp to his vest. A message appeared on the hidden tablet beneath the empty chair. Pilot report received unreliable approach lighting runway 29. Below it was a second line. Evening arrival bank begins 18:05. Raymond checked the concourse clock. 3:58. Just over 2 hours remain. Across the terminal, Dana stood beneath the gold banner while photographers tested their flashes. She laughed with state officials as if the airport beyond the glass belonged to the ceremony instead of the aircraft approaching it. Then she noticed Raymond watching the airfield. Her smile thinned. She called the operations manager over and whispered something in his ear. A minute later, Raymond's radio sounded. Cole, report to passenger services. When he arrived, the manager waited beside his locker. Director Lyle wants your airfield access suspended for the rest of the day. I do not have airfield access. She says you have been wandering into restricted areas. I followed an accessible passenger route. The manager rubbed his forehead. Raymond, I am trying to keep this simple. Stay upstairs, push chairs, do not ask about runway systems. And if a passenger asks why their pilot went around, tell them weather. Raymond held the man's gaze. That is not the same thing. No, the manager admitted, but it is what Dana once said. He walked away before the silence could become an agreement. Raymond opened his locker. The federal tablet rested beneath his gloves. Beside it lay the medication he sometimes needed after long shifts. His hip was already burning, and the safest choice for himself was clear. Document what he had. Leave before Dana recognized the audit. Let Washington request the log through official channels tomorrow. Then a low rumble passed over the roof. An arriving jet had abandoned its descent and climbed back into the clouds. Passengers near the windows raised their phones, assuming it was something dramatic to film. Raymond knew better. A go-around was not proof of disaster. It was proof that disaster had been avoided once. He closed the locker without taking the medication. Then he removed the brass stamp from his vest, studied its worn face, and pinned it back above his name. He could no longer wait for the system to reveal what Dana had trained everyone inside it to hide. Somewhere below the concourse, the full outage log still existed. And before the ceremony began, Raymond Cole intended to get it. At 4:12, Raymond returned to the lower concourse with an empty wheelchair and a transfer card clipped to the handle. The card was legitimate. The passenger was not. He had borrowed the chair assignment from a delayed gate because it was the only reason a porter could still move through the service corridor without drawing immediate attention. The restricted door beside operations remained locked. Raymond stopped at the wall phone and called maintenance. This is passenger services, he said. I need to confirm whether the remote gate route is open for an assisted transfer. A tired voice answered. Not through the east tunnel. Lighting crew has equipment staged there. Runway lighting. A pause. Who is this? Raymond Cole. The line went quiet. Then the voice returned lower than before. Use the west elevator. The call ended. Raymond set the receiver down. It was not cooperation, but it was confirmation. He pushed the chair toward the west elevator and descended to baggage level. The hallway there was narrower, lined with electrical panels and gray doors marked with department codes. His hip tightened with every step. Near the maintenance office, a rolling cart blocked the corridor. A handwritten tag hung from its handle. Approach lighting parts pending. Raymond photographed it with the concealed tablet. A technician emerged from the office and nearly collided with him. You cannot be down here. I was directed to the west elevator. Not past this point. Raymond nodded toward the cart. Are those parts for runway 29er? The technician's jaw shifted. Ask operations. I did. Then ask them again. The man started to close the office door. Raymond said pilots have reported the same lighting pattern for 3 weeks. The technician's hand paused. I do not know anything about pilot reports, but you know the lights are not repaired. The door remained half open. For a moment, the technician seemed ready to say more. Then footsteps sounded from the stairwell. Dana's operations manager appeared with a security officer behind him. Raymond, the manager, said, I told you to stay upstairs. I am following an accessible transfer route. There is no passenger. Raymond glanced at the empty chair. No. The manager exhaled through his nose. Director Lyle wants your badge. My porter badge. Until we sort this out. The security officer extended his hand. Raymond removed the plastic employee card from his vest and passed it over. The brass stamp remained pinned above the empty badge clip. You are off duty, the manager said. Collect your belongings and leave through the public entrance. What is the status of runway 29er? That is no longer your concern. It becomes everyone's concern at 6:05. The technician lowered his eyes. The manager's voice dropped. Do not make this worse for yourself. Raymond absorbed the words. For 9 years, people had spoken to him as if injury had made him fragile. They softened difficult truths, redirected conversations, and praised him for accepting smaller roles without complaint. Dana's manager was doing something different. He was offering safety in exchange for silence. Raymond pushed the empty wheelchair back toward the elevator. Behind him, the maintenance office door closed. The first dismissal had cost him access. The second had cost him his badge. The next would cost him the chance to stop an unsafe arrival. Upstairs, the ceremony had entered final rehearsal. A string quartet tested its microphones near the stage. Caterers arranged glasses beside a scale model of the proposed terminal expansion. Dana stood with a state transportation official pointing toward the airfield as if every light beyond the windows had been placed there for her speech. Raymond returned the empty chair to passenger services. Leon noticed the missing badge. "They sent you home?" "They told me to leave." "Then leave." Raymond opened his locker and removed the black tablet. Leon stared at it. "What is that?" "Something I hoped I would not need today." Raymond tucked it beneath his folded jacket. Leon caught his arm. "Dana is looking for a reason to blame somebody. Do not give her your name. She already has it." "No, she has Raymond the porter. Let her keep thinking that is all." Raymond met his friend's worried gaze. "An aircraft went around 10 minutes ago." "That happens." "Yes." He paused. "And sometimes it happens because a pilot sees what the people on the ground refuse to fix." Leon released his sleeve. Raymond took the bottle of pain medication from the locker, considered it, then returned it unopened. The pills dulled the injury, but they also slowed his focus. He needed every detail clear. At 4:35, a public announcement warned of possible weather delays. The word lighting was absent. Raymond moved into the crowd without his badge, dressed now in a plain blue work shirt beneath the porter vest. Without a wheelchair in front of him, people noticed the unevenness in his walk. He entered a public seating area overlooking the east taxiway and opened the tablet beneath his jacket. The pilot complaints appeared beside an FAA inspection form. 3 reports. 2 go-arounds. 1 repeated approach light failure. Enough to justify immediate review, but not yet enough to prove Dana had knowingly certified repairs that were never verified. He needed the outage log. Across the concourse, the same maintenance clerk emerged from a side corridor carrying a sealed shred container. Raymond stood. The clerk saw him and changed direction. Raymond followed at a measured pace. They reached a service alcove behind a row of vending machines hidden from the ceremony cameras but visible to travelers passing toward baggage claim. "You should leave," the clerk whispered. "So should the evening arrivals. I cannot give you internal records. You can preserve a safety record." The clerk gripped the container handle. "You do not understand what she does to people who contradict her." Raymond's voice stayed even. "I understand what happens when nobody does." The clerk studied the scarred line of Raymond's gait. "You were in an airfield accident." "Yes." "Was it lights?" It was a report marked corrected before anyone checked. The clerk's hand loosened. Then Dana's operations manager appeared at the end of the corridor. The clerk moved away at once, pushing the container through a locked door. Raymond's chance vanished with him. The manager approached. "Security is waiting at the main entrance." "I am leaving." "You are walking deeper into the terminal." Raymond glanced toward the ceremony stage. "Public entrance is that direction." The manager blocked his path. "Dana knows you were questioning maintenance staff. She wants the porter vest returned too." Raymond's hand rose to the brass stamp. "This belongs to passenger services." "Then remove it." A family passed nearby, the father slowing when he sensed the tension. Raymond unfastened the vest and handed it over. The manager held it by 2 fingers as though it were stained. The gate stamp stayed in Raymond's palm. "That too. It is mine. Airport property." "No, my wife gave it to me when I took this job." The manager's expression changed, but only briefly. "Then keep it. Just go." Raymond slipped the stamp into his trouser pocket. His wife had found it years earlier in a closing railway office, a heavy brass tool once used to mark luggage transfers. After the accident, when Raymond feared he would never work around transportation again, she had polished it and replaced the worn handle. "A journey is still a responsibility," she had told him, "even when your part seems small." She had died 2 years later. The stamp was not evidence. It was not authority. But it reminded Raymond that dignity did not come from the title printed on a badge. The operations manager escorted him toward the public doors. Halfway across the concourse, Raymond's tablet vibrated beneath his jacket. A new pilot report had arrived. He stopped near a bank of windows and read it. "Runway 29, approach lights partially visible. Unreliable in fog. Request immediate field verification." Below it, the system displayed a warning. "Local status repaired and operational." Raymond stared at the contradiction. The pilot saw failure. The airport record claimed repair. Dana had not merely minimized a delay. Someone under her authority had entered a safety status that did not match the airfield. The manager noticed the tablet. "What are you doing?" Raymond locked the screen. "Confirming something." "You need to leave now." Raymond resumed walking. At the entrance, 2 security officers waited beside the revolving doors. Beyond them, rain had begun tapping against the pavement. He could walk out. The FAA could request records in the morning. The airport might reroute aircraft after another pilot complained. Every procedural excuse remained available. Then the runway lights disappeared completely behind a curtain of fog. A child near the windows pressed both hands to the glass and pointed toward a descending jet. "Where did it go?" His mother searched the gray sky. "I cannot see it." Raymond stopped. So did the operations manager. Seconds later, the aircraft climbed back into view, engines roaring as it abandoned the approach. The child covered his ears. The manager whispered, "Second go around." Raymond removed the federal tablet. He opened the inspection portal and entered the pilot report. Then he selected the option marked Initiate Urgent Field Action. The manager read the screen and stepped backward. "You are FAA." Raymond did not answer. He attached the previous complaints, recorded the false operational status, and submitted the request that would preserve the outage record before anyone could alter it again. A confirmation number appeared. His first active step was complete, but the closure threshold still required the local log or direct federal verification. Raymond placed the tablet beneath his arm. Across the concourse, the maintenance clerk had reappeared. This time he was no longer carrying the shred container. He held a single folded page. Dana noticed him at the same moment. Her rehearsal stopped. The clerk began walking toward Raymond. Dana came down from the stage, and the expression on her face told Raymond she finally understood that the porter she had ordered out of her airport had never been there merely to push chairs. Dana crossed the concourse before the maintenance clerk reached Raymond. She intercepted him beside the ceremony rope, took the folded page from his hand, and read the heading. Her face did not change. That frightened the clerk more than anger would have. "You removed an internal document without authorization," she said. "It was marked for shredding, because it was outdated. The lights are still failing." Dana folded the page once more. Behind her, invited officials were beginning to fill the front rows. Camera lights blinked on. The string quartet stopped rehearsing, leaving the concourse exposed to the rising sound of aircraft engines beyond the glass. Raymond stood 20 feet away, federal tablet under his arm. Dana addressed the clerk without raising her voice. "Return to maintenance. We will discuss your employment tomorrow." The man's shoulders dropped. Raymond moved closer. "I need that page preserved." Dana finally faced him. "You need to leave airport property. It contains the outage record for Runway 29er. It contains preliminary notes from a closed maintenance item. Then there should be no reason to hide it." A few travelers slowed near the velvet rope. Dana noticed them and reshaped her expression into patient concern. "Mr. Cole has had a difficult afternoon," she told the nearest security officer. "Escort him outside without creating a scene." Raymond opened the tablet. The FAA portal displayed the pilot report and the urgent field action confirmation. "I am requesting access to the original outage log." "You are requesting nothing." Dana took another step toward him. "You were relieved of duty. Your badge was suspended. You entered restricted corridors under false pretenses, questioned employees outside your role, and disrupted a state ceremony. 2 aircraft have gone around. Because of fog. Their reports say unreliable approach lighting. You do not speak for flight crews." Raymond held the tablet where she could see the federal seal. A nearby donor stopped scrolling through his phone. Dana's eyes flicked to the screen, then to the reporters assembling near the stage. Her voice dropped. "Put that away." The outage log, Dana. It was the first time he had used her name. The operations manager arrived breathing hard. He saw the document in Dana's hand and understood immediately. "Director," he whispered, "we should move this into the office." "No." Dana's answer came too quickly. She could not disappear minutes before the governor's representative entered. She could not allow Raymond to control where the conversation happened. Most of all, she could not let anyone see her retreat from a porter she had already dismissed publicly. She stepped closer until only the wheelchair positioned near Raymond separated them. "You think carrying a government tablet makes you important?" Raymond's grip tightened around its edge. "No." "Then stop pretending you understand what it takes to operate an airport." "I understand what it takes to close an unsafe runway." A silence changed texture around them. The donor lowered his phone. The young gate agent from Flight 418 stopped behind her desk. The maintenance clerk remained near the corridor entrance, unable to leave. Dana glanced toward each witness. Her public smile returned, but there was no warmth left in it. "Raymond Cole is a wheelchair porter," she said clearly. "He is not an engineer, a pilot, or a member of airport command." Raymond answered just as clearly. "I did not claim to be." "Then explain why you have spent the day frightening employees with technical questions you are not qualified to ask." "Because the answers affect the people landing here tonight." Dana gave a small laugh for the cameras. "There it is. A man with an old grievance decides he knows more than every professional in this building." The words landed harder than Raymond expected. Not because they were cruel, because she had found the wound beneath his calm. She had learned about the accident, perhaps from personnel records, perhaps from the manager. It did not matter. Dana continued. "Mr. Cole was injured years ago in an airfield incident. Since then, he appears to see danger everywhere." The operations manager stared at the floor. Raymond felt the familiar ache sharpen along his hip, carrying him back to rain on pavement, and a vehicle appearing through darkness where it should not have been. Dana saw the reaction and pressed further. "I sympathize with what happened to you, truly, but trauma is not authority." The gate agent whispered, "That is enough." Dana ignored her. Raymond said, "The log. You are done asking for it." She held the folded page above the nearest catering bin. The maintenance clerk moved forward. "Director, please do not destroy that." Dana's hand paused. "It is a duplicate." "No," the clerk said. "It is the only printed copy with the verification column." The statement carried farther than he intended. A reporter near the stage raised her microphone. Dana lowered the page but did not release it. "What verification column?" The clerk's courage faltered. Raymond answered. The one showing whether each repair was tested at night. Dana's eyes hardened. You have not seen this document. I saw enough. You saw a piece of paper on someone's desk. I saw repeated failures, a repaired status, and no nighttime verification. The operations manager murmured. Dana, give him the page. She rounded on him. You work for this airport. I know. Then act like it. Dana turned back to Raymond and held up the folded log. This is how misinformation begins. A service employee glances at a technical record, misunderstands it, and decides the airport is hiding something. Raymond extended his hand. Let the FAA decide whether I misunderstood. Her gaze dropped to his palm. The brass gate stamp rested there. Raymond had taken it from his pocket without realizing it. The worn handle carried a faint groove where his thumb had pressed it thousands of times. Dana recognized it from his vest. What is that supposed to prove? Nothing, Raymond said. It reminds me that every transfer has to be accounted for. This is not a transfer desk. No, it is a runway people are trusting you to account for. Dana's jaw tightened. The governor's aide appeared at the edge of the stage and signaled that the ceremony would begin in 5 minutes. Dana made her choice. She tossed the folded outage log to the operations manager, then struck Raymond's hand with the side of her wrist. The brass stamp fell. Before he could bend, Dana's heel connected with it. The stamp shot across the concourse, spinning beneath the lights before sliding under the ceremony stage. Several travelers gasped. Raymond stood frozen beside the wheelchair. Dana pointed toward the public doors. Porters push chairs, she said. They do not question aircraft delays. A camera operator caught every word. The maintenance clerk shut his eyes. The gate agent's hand covered her mouth. Dana raised her voice for the security officers. Remove him from the ceremony area. Raymond lowered himself carefully, using the wheelchair for support. Pain burned through his left side as he reached beneath the stage. For one brief second, he was no longer an auditor, former operations specialist, or injured man who had spent 9 years rebuilding a useful life. He was exactly what Dana wanted the crowd to see. An aging porter on one knee, searching under a platform for an object she had kicked away. His fingers found the cold brass. He heard Dana above him telling the governor's aide there had been a minor employee disturbance. Raymond rose. The stamp was scratched but intact. He wiped it against his sleeve and slipped it into his pocket. Then he took the federal tablet from beneath the wheelchair seat. Dana noticed the movement. Give me that device. Raymond opened the urgent action form. The supporting documents appeared in order. The pilot reports the false operational status and the photograph of the maintenance cart marked parts pending. The central attachment field remained empty. He still needed the outage log. Security approached from both sides. Dana climbed the stage and reached for the microphone. The ceremony music began. Raymond's thumb hovered above the unsigned closure order. Then the operations manager moved beside him. Without meeting Raymond's eyes, he opened the folded page Dana had given him and held it beneath the tablet camera. The full taxiway light outage log filled the screen. 5 failures. No nighttime verification. And beside the most recent repaired entry, a handwritten approval, D. Lyle. Raymond captured the page. He attached it to the federal file. Then, as security reached for his arms, he signed the runway closure order. A confirmation tone sounded from the tablet. At that exact moment, every operations phone behind the stage began ringing. The first operations phone rang behind the stage. Then a second line lit up. By the time Dana reached the podium, every red indicator on the desk was flashing. She gripped the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We experienced a minor personnel disruption, but Tidewater Regional remains fully operational. A federal alert tone sounded from Raymond's tablet. Runway 29 closed pending safety verification. The security officers beside him stopped. Dana continued speaking as if the sound belonged to someone else's phone. Today we celebrate a new chapter of reliability, growth, and public confidence. Director Lyle. The operations manager's voice came through the stage speakers. He had picked up the internal microphone without realizing it was live. Dana's head snapped toward him. He held the outage log in one hand and a ringing phone in the other. Air traffic control has acknowledged the closure. Dana covered the podium microphone. Tell them it was submitted without authority. Raymond answered from the floor. It was submitted under federal authority. Several cameras shifted toward him. Dana's hand remained over the microphone, but her words carried across the front rows. You cannot close a runway because you saw a maintenance cart. I did not. Raymond raised the tablet. I closed it because pilots reported unreliable approach lighting. Airport records claimed the system was repaired, and the verification log shows it was never tested under the conditions in which it failed. Dana laughed once. It sounded brittle. That log is not a final engineering report. No, Raymond said. It is the airport's own outage record. The maintenance clerk stepped out from the side corridor. His face was pale, but his voice held. I prepared it. Dana stared at him. You prepared a working draft. I entered the failures from maintenance calls. And you are not qualified to determine runway safety. I am qualified to record whether a repair was verified. A reporter moved closer to the ceremony rope. How many failures were recorded, she asked. Dana pointed toward security. This is an internal operational matter. The clerk answered anyway. 5 failures in 11 days. The murmur spreading through the guests grew louder. Dana lifted her uncovered microphone. Intermittent lighting faults occur at airports across the country. Each incident was handled according to procedure. The clerk unfolded the page. 3 were marked repaired without a nighttime field test. Dana's expression sharpened. You do not know why those entries were approved. The young gate agent from Flight 418 raised her voice from behind the desk. I was told to change a lighting delay to weather sequencing. Dana faced her. You were told to use the official operational status. The captain's report said lighting concern. That was not a confirmed diagnosis. It was the reason the aircraft delayed. Dana's voice rose. And passengers would have panicked over an unverified cockpit observation. Raymond's reply was quiet enough that the room leaned toward it. Pilots are not passengers. Dana went still. They are trained witnesses to the conditions you certified as safe. The governor's aide moved beside the podium. Director Lyle, is the runway currently closed? Dana lowered her microphone. Temporarily, because an individual exceeded his authority. The aide glanced toward Raymond. Who is he? Dana looked down at his blue work shirt, the empty badge clip, and the wheelchair beside him. A porter. Raymond unlocked the tablet. The federal identification screen replaced the closure order. Raymond Cole, Federal Aviation Safety Auditor, active field authorization. The nearest camera zoomed in. Dana stared at the screen. For several seconds, she said nothing. The airport director, who had controlled every phrase spoken near her ceremony, had no prepared language for the man she had just forced to search beneath the stage. Raymond did not use the silence to humiliate her. He used it to finish the work. I was assigned to review pilot reports concerning night landing conditions at this airport, he said. The review remained covert so I could observe how outages were recorded before management knew federal inspectors were present. Dana's hand tightened around the podium. You misrepresented yourself to my staff. I worked an approved passenger service assignment. You entered restricted areas. I followed accessible routes available to the job you assigned me. You manipulated frightened employees into giving you documents. The maintenance clerk shook his head. He did not. Dana ignored him. The so-called audit is contaminated. He had a prior runway accident. He is personally biased. The accusation produced less reaction than before. The guests had already seen Raymond remain calm while Dana kicked away his stamp. They had heard the clerk confirm the log and watched her order a safety delay relabeled. The room understood the pattern now. Dana did not. She pointed at the tablet. One auditor cannot override airport command based on personal suspicion. Raymond turned the screen toward the stage. This is not suspicion. The runway closure order filled the display. It carried the submission time federal case number and Raymond's digital signature. This order is based on current pilot reports, the airport's operational status entry, and the taxiway light outage log. The governor's aide read the heading. The funding banner above her moved gently in the ventilation draft. Dana reached for the document. Give me that. Raymond pulled the tablet back. No. It was the first word he had denied her all afternoon. Not loudly, not angrily, simply without room for negotiation. Dana stepped down from the stage. Do you understand what you have done? We have state officials here. The evening schedule will collapse. Airlines will demand compensation. This ceremony was tied to a funding decision that took 2 years to secure. Raymond remained beside the wheelchair. Aircraft can be rerouted. You are jeopardizing millions of dollars. I am preventing pilots from being asked to land through fog with unreliable lights. Dana stopped within arm's reach. You cannot prove an accident would have happened. No. Raymond's voice dropped. That is the point of closing the runway before one does. A camera light blinked near Dana's face. She seemed to notice it only then. The reporters, the donors, the employees she had trained to remain silent. All of them were watching the same person who had called herself the face of airport safety argue that the absence of a crash was proof the risk could continue. The operations phone rang again. The manager answered. Operations. He listened, then covered the receiver. Federal Regional Command is on the line. Dana extended her hand. I will take it. The manager did not give her the phone. They asked to speak with the acting operations authority. I am the operations authority. A new voice came through the receiver loud enough for those nearby to hear. Pending review of the closure circumstances, Director Lyle is to be removed from operational decision-making effective immediately. Dana's mouth opened. The manager's eyes widened. The voice continued. Place the Deputy Operations Chief in control. Preserve all maintenance records, status changes, and communications related to Runway 29er. No records are to be altered or destroyed. The maintenance clerk stared at the sealed shred container near the corridor. So did Raymond. Dana followed their attention. That container contains routine duplicates. The clerk spoke before she could say more. It contains discarded maintenance pages from this afternoon. The governor's aide closed her folder. Secure it. 2 airport police officers moved toward the corridor. Dana reached for the manager's phone. This is my airport. You do not remove me during a ceremony based on a porter's accusation. The federal voice answered through the speaker. The closure order was issued by an authorized FAA auditor. Dana froze. The manager slowly lowered the receiver. She looked at Raymond again, but this time she saw the details she had dismissed. The precision of his questions. The concealed tablet. The calm refusal to leave before the record was preserved. The old injury she had used against him was not proof that he imagined danger. It was proof he understood its cost. Dana's voice softened. Raymond, we can resolve this privately. He studied her for a moment. Minutes earlier, she had announced his trauma to a crowd and called it weakness. Now that his title had changed in her mind, so had her respect. That opportunity passed when the airport status was entered as repaired, he said. I did not personally inspect the lights, but you personally approved the status. The maintenance team advised me. The clerk held up the log. I wrote parts pending. Dana turned toward him. You told me the system was partially operational. I told you it required a night test. The operations manager added I recommended delaying the ceremony until verification. Dana's eyes moved between them. You both approved the schedule. No, the manager said. You ordered us to preserve it. The room understood before Dana fully did. This was no longer one porter's word against an airport director. The witness confirmed the warning. The closure order established the danger. The outage log showed the repeated failures. And Dana's own authorization connected the false status to her decision. She moved back toward the podium. We are not conducting a trial in an airport terminal. Raymond nodded. No, a federal review will do that properly. The words ended her final attempt to control the room. Airport police approached the stage. One officer spoke with professional restraint. Director Lyle, you are not under arrest. However, you have been removed from operational control pending federal review. We need your airport credentials and access device. Dana stared at him. You work for me. Not in this matter. She clutched the credential hanging from her neck. The officer waited. At last, Dana pulled the lanyard free and placed it in his hand. No applause followed. No one cheered. The consequence was too serious for celebration. Outside the windows, the first evening arrival altered course over the bay. Another aircraft followed its lights, shifting away from Tidewater Regional toward a safe alternate airport. The ceremony screens changed again. Runway 29, closed arrivals, rerouted, maintenance inspection in progress. Raymond watched the aircraft turn. Only after the last one disappeared into the fog did he place the tablet beneath his arm. Then he reached into his pocket. The brass gate stamp was scraped along one side from Dana's kick. He rubbed his thumb across the mark and pinned it back onto the empty place above his shirt pocket. The young gate agent approached him. Mr. Cole. Yes. Were those passengers ever in immediate danger? Raymond watched the dark runway beyond the glass. They are not now. Behind him, federal investigators were already requesting access to the operations office. Dana stood away from the podium without her credentials, surrounded by the ceremony she had built to prove the airport was safe. Raymond remained beside an empty wheelchair, wearing no employee badge and holding no microphone. Yet every evening flight was moving safely because he had drawn the boundary everyone else had been afraid to draw. By 7 that evening, Tidewater Regional Airport no longer looked like a place prepared for celebration. The gold funding banner had been taken down. The string quartet had packed its instruments without performing. State officials left through a side entrance while federal investigators entered the operations office carrying evidence bags and record preservation notices. Runway 29 remained dark. Maintenance crews worked under portable floodlights, tracing the failed circuit from the approach sector toward a damaged control cabinet. The fault was not subtle once someone tested it under actual evening conditions. Several lights flickered. Others did not respond at all. Incoming flights were rerouted to Richmond, Newport News, and Raleigh. Travelers complained about missed connections, hotel costs, and long bus transfers. No one was asked to descend toward an unreliable runway. Raymond stayed until the last assisted passenger had a new route. Technically, he was no longer working as a porter. His badge remained suspended in the operations manager's pocket, and federal officers had asked him not to leave until his preliminary statement was complete. Still, when he saw the elderly woman from that morning waiting near Gate 8 with tears in her eyes, he took an empty wheelchair and went to her. They canceled my flight, she said. They redirected it. Is that better? Tonight, yes. Raymond brought her to the rebooking desk and remained beside her until an agent secured a hotel room and a morning departure. She studied the missing badge clip on his vest. Are you in trouble? Raymond glanced toward the dark runway. No, ma'am. He did not explain that airport leadership had been removed, that evidence was being secured, or that the runway closure order carried his signature. She did not know that the inconvenience she faced had been chosen over a risk she would never have seen from her seat. That was how safety often worked. Its success looked like nothing happening. Before she was taken to the shuttle, the woman pressed a folded tissue into Raymond's hand. Inside was a small note written in blue ink. Thank you for making sure I got where I needed to go. Raymond read it twice. Then he placed it behind the brass gate stamp in his shirt pocket. 3 days later, the FAA confirmed that the approach lighting system had been operating intermittently for nearly 2 weeks. The airport had repeatedly marked repairs complete without nighttime verification. The full review would take months. Dana Lyle was placed on administrative leave pending federal and state investigations. She was barred from operational decision-making, and outside counsel began reviewing whether safety records had been altered to protect the funding ceremony. No dramatic arrest followed. No judge appeared in the concourse. The consequences came the way real consequences often did, through suspended authority, preserved records, sworn interviews, and decisions that could no longer be edited before the cameras arrived. The airport board appointed an interim director and ordered an emergency audit of every runway and taxiway maintenance entry from the previous year. Employees were given a confidential reporting channel outside the director's office. Delay reasons involving safety could no longer be changed by communications staff. Any repair affecting approach or runway lighting now required independent field verification before the system could be listed as operational. The young gate agent was invited to give a statement. So was the maintenance clerk. Neither lost their job. Leon called Raymond the following week. They gave us new instructions, he said. If operations tells us to hide a safety delay, we report the instruction. That should have always been the rule. It is now. Raymond returned to Tidewater Regional 12 days after the closure. The federal review was still active, but his undercover assignment had ended. Passenger Services had restored his badge and offered to remove the suspension from his record. Raymond asked them to keep the original entry. The manager blinked. Why? Because it happened. We can correct it. Add the correction. Do not erase the record. The manager understood. Raymond clipped the badge beneath the brass stamp and began his shift. The concourse smelled the same as before: coffee floor wax and damp air from the bay. Travelers still arrived late. Children still cried near security. Wheelchair brakes still caught on the seam outside Gate 11. The airport had not become perfect. It had become more honest. Near sunset, Raymond helped a passenger transfer from a Baltimore flight to a connection bound for Atlanta. The man spoke little and apologized each time Raymond adjusted the footrests. You do not have to apologize, Raymond said. At the new gate, he checked the route, confirmed the boarding time, and stamped the transfer card. The brass face left a clean mark. The passenger glanced at the stamp. That thing looks old. It is. Still works. Raymond pinned it back onto his vest. Only if someone uses it. Through the terminal windows, runway 29er stretched toward the Chesapeake under a clear evening sky. Every approach light burned in sequence. White points appeared across the darkening ground, steady and visible, leading toward the threshold. A passenger jet descended over the water and touched down without hesitation. Raymond watched until its wheels settled onto the pavement. His left hip still hurt. The accident had not been undone. His wife was still gone. Dana's public humiliation could not be erased simply because the truth had arrived afterward. But dignity had never required pretending the wound did not exist. It required refusing to let someone use it as a reason to silence him. Raymond touched the scratched edge of the gate stamp. The mark from Dana's heel remained along the brass. He had chosen not to polish it away. It reminded him that objects could be kicked aside, titles could be stripped, and people could be misjudged by the uniform they wore. Responsibility remained. That evening, another traveler thanked Raymond for helping her reach the correct gate. She never knew he had closed a runway. She never knew her flight landed beneath lights that might otherwise have remained dark. Raymond preferred it that way. He pushed the empty wheelchair back through the concourse as the final daylight faded over Norfolk. Above his name badge, the brass stamp caught the glow from the runway and shone for a moment like something newly restored. What would you have done if protecting people meant losing your job, your dignity, and the respect of everyone watching? Share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories about ordinary people who choose what is right when silence would be easier.